bra cups are sewn, another way to put it is that there is a left boob and a right boob. Give yourself a round of applause if you didn't sew 2 left boobs and 2 right boobs. Ask me how I know, I've done it before. Now before we attach the boobs, aka the bra cups, to the frame, we first need to assemble the frame, assemble the back band, attach the back band to the front frame. I went ahead and I did this step because I think that it's easier to see the after rather than explain it before. It's a really simple step. It just is straight stitches, back stitching at beginning and end, but it can definitely be mixed up or you might have errors because it's very easy to mix up these pieces. So these pieces, like, there are a lot of pieces and they could definitely get mixed up. So we have, best way to do it is just lay everything out and make sure that it lines up. And before I bring this to the machine, I actually pin them together. So you have 1, 2, 3, 9, 8, 7 is the order from center front to center back. Let me shift this over so that makes a little bit more sense. Ooh. Okay, so from, ooh, it's a little lopsided there. Okay, so from center front to center back, we have pattern piece number 1, center front frame, pattern piece number 2, middle front frame, pattern piece number 3, side front frame, pattern piece number 9, the side back, pattern piece number 8, middle back, and pattern piece number 7, center back. So I like to lay everything out, put it together, and bring it to the sewing machine so they don't get it mixed up when I get to the sewing machine. Now, something to note is that when I sewed these together, I sewed it with wrong sides together so that the seam allowances were exposed on the face side. And that is because I'm gonna have my channeling exposed. Now let's just say that you don't want to have your channeling exposed, you wanna have it on the inside with the plastic boning, then you will sew it with right sides together rather than wrong sides together. And if you get, look, I'm not, perfection's overrated. Look, this does not line up perfectly. That's okay. That is okay. We are just going to hide our mistakes and we're gonna clean that up right there. Nobody's gonna know. Boom. Out of sight, out of mind, forget about it. All right, so now the next step, once you have your frame and your back band assembled, you attach the back band to the frame. Next step is to apply the channeling. Key thing with the channeling is that you are sewing. So this sewing like this on top through all layers is a no. What you want to be doing is you want to be folding your seam allowances to one side and then have the garment facing the other side, laying the channeling down. Plush side is facing up. And this is regardless of whether you're doing it with right sides together or wrong sides together, or if you're doing the channeling exposed or the channeling not exposed. This is the same for both. So you're gonna lay the channeling over. Plush side is facing up. Essentially, you wanna be stitching over those same stitch lines. Perfection's overrated, but that is the goal, to get as close to perfect as possible. So with this, I lay my channeling right on top. I lay it so that the channeling is like a hair past the stitch line, but my needle is right on the edge of that channeling and going through the original stitch line. I don't pin. As I'm sewing, I'm folding this back, double checking that it's on it, that the channeling is extended past the seam line, and but my needle is right on the seam line. And then I'll sew a little bit more, boom, and then I'll fold that back, and I'll make sure that my needle is on that stitch line. So I'm gonna do that to all the seams. And a question that commonly comes up is that, should I start and stop at the very edge? Yes, your channeling on all of these should extend to the top edge and then extend to the bottom edge as well. We're not stopping this short for to create room for when we sew the cups to the frame. channeling has been sewn to all of the vertical seams on the frame and the back bands. Now comes the fun part, attaching the boobs, aka the bra cups, to the frame. First thing you want to make sure is that the wider portion of the upper cup is at the center front. And then the narrower portion of the upper cup is at the underarm. So don't sew the right boob to the left side and then the left boob to the right side. So you just want to make sure before you start pinning, double check that they are on the correct side. Okay, the cup is pinned to the frame. I like to pin one cup, sew it, and then pin the other cup and sew it. Just a lot of pins everywhere. I'm taking a few steps back, but I don't press the seam allowances on here on the frame when I sew the frame together, when I add the channeling, because once you put in that boning, it's gonna do the pressing and make sure that it lays flat. So that question might have come up in your head. I wanted to answer it. So one thing to note is that when you are sewing the cups to the frame, so you have the wider edge at the center front, you have the narrower edge at the side, but you are not pinning all the way up to this edge. This edge actually comes to about the horizontal seam, and that's where your channeling your foldover elastic goes. So do not pin all the way up to this edge. You only pin the bra cup to the frame up to this edge right here. So that if you were trying to pin your cups to your frame and there was just like, it wasn't fitting in at a 1-to-1 ratio, that is probably why. So you see here that a little portion of the bra cup actually is still extending or exposed. That is the correct way. All right, so I'm gonna sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, straight stitch, back stitch at the beginning and the ends. I like to sew it with the bra cup facing down. I feel like it's a little bit easier because you're not gathering it, but you're easing it. And whenever you're easing one fabric into another, it's always good to have it on the bottom because the feed dogs will help ease it in. Bra cups are in. Now it's time to sew the underwire channeling to the wire seam line. The application / method is exactly the same as you did on the frame. So you want to sew it with the seam allowances facing one side, the rest of the bra / frame facing the other direction. You don't want to be sewing it all the way down on top like this. Now, a common mistake is that when you have the seam allowances folded to one side, you want to make sure that you're sewing it in a way so that the seam allowances are going to be pressed down into the frame. You don't want to be sewing it so that they'll be pressed up into the frame. That may be a little confusing to understand, so here is another way to visualize it. On this side, I already sewed the channeling, the first pass. Now, when I press this down, it is pressing down into the frame. What you don't want to do is you don't want to sew in a way so that when I press it, it presses up into the cup. That is a no. This is a yes. sewed the underwire channeling to the frame, and then I flipped it down. And the last step in this video is that you are going to sew another line of stitches on the other side of the channeling. Super important that you get really close to that outer edge, because if you get, if your stitches are too inside of it, then you won't be able to insert the underwire. After you've done that, then you can go back and you can sew down the other side of the channeling on the frame and the back band. You can do this before as well, but you can do it after. It's one of those things that you can, it really depends on, it's one of those operations that whether you do it before or whether you do it after, it's totally up to you.